Hi everybody, welcome to Wine Cellar Restaurant. I'm Trevor Littlejohn, chef de partie at the Canadian Food and Wine Institute. So today we're going to be working with baby back ribs. And what we have when we have baby back ribs is we've got nice meat along the top and we have very little fat. But what we need to look for when we're doing our ribs is any kind of discoloration along the skin. We want to make sure we avoid that when we're at the grocery store. So this one is very nice. It's got very minimal bruising. It hasn't been mishandled at all. But when we flip it over, there's a couple things we need to do to get it ready for the oven. So these little flaps here, we don't really need these. So with a very sharp knife, we're just going to take those off and we're going to discard them. And then one final trick that everyone seems to always forget is there is a membrane along the bottom side of the bones that separates the ribs from the tenderloin. But what we need to do is scratch just along the bone here, get our fingers in, get dirty, take that membrane, and with your other fingers push down on the ribs, lift and pull, and take that whole membrane off. And what that's gonna do is stop our ribs from curling up when we put them in the oven and allow them to cook flat and even. To get our ribs ready for the oven, all we wanna do, heavy salt and heavy pepper. Don't be afraid to rub it in there and get dirty. It's okay, you're gonna wash your hands later anyway. Flip over the ribs, same thing on the top side. Now you might be saying to yourself, why didn't I put tons of different spices on here? That's because I want the barbecue sauce to do the work and glaze the ribs later. All we're doing right now is using the salt and pepper to season the meat. And once the meat has this really awesome glossy tinge to it on the top, that means the salt is doing its job and it's drawing excess moisture to the surface, which is going to create that classic crust. With a clean pan lined with parchment paper, we're just going to transfer our ribs and we're going to put the bone side down. So that way, as the ribs roast in the oven, the fat is going to baste the meat and keep them nice and juicy and tender. And now we're going to go to a 400-degree Fahrenheit oven and get our ribs roasting nicely. All right, so our ribs are roasting in the oven, and while that's happening, we need to make our barbecue sauce. Simplest barbecue sauce ever here. What we're looking at is some tomato paste. We've got some apple cider vinegar, some raw honey, cinnamon, nutmeg, onion powder, garlic powder, chili powder, and paprika. All the classic seasonings that you'd normally find in any regular barbecue sauce, except we're just gonna make it ourselves. First thing we need to do is in a pan on medium-high heat, we need to toast our tomato paste. Now the reason we wanna do that is because the tomato paste itself is naturally bitter, and we wanna cook some of that bitterness out. You'll see some browning start to occur. That's how we know we've cooked that bitterness out of the barbecue sauce. Then, we're gonna go with our apple cider vinegar, and we're just gonna incorporate that into the tomato paste. Then we're going to add our honey. Once that's all bubbling and coming together nice, we're just gonna add our spices. Once we start adding our spices, we're gonna wanna turn it down to low because we do not want to burn those spices and make them bitter. In goes our onion powder. In goes our cinnamon. Making sure to stir everything in. In goes our nutmeg. And now you start to really smell some fragrance going on. And the final touch to add the smokiness and the little bit of heat that we need in our barbecue sauce, we're adding our paprika and chili powder. Let all of that just come together. And you might be thinking to yourself right now, geez, Trevor, that looks a little thick. But the reason we've got it thick like this is because we want it to be a glazing sauce on top of the ribs. So what's actually going to happen is the juices from the ribs later when we glaze them is actually going to mix with this barbecue sauce and coat everything nicely and create a really awesome glazy, sticky texture. Once we don't see any lumps anymore, our barbecue sauce is complete and we can just transfer it to a bowl and reserve it for brushing onto our ribs. And there you have it, homemade barbecue sauce. All right, everyone, our ribs have just come out of the oven. We're gonna check and see if they're done. And the way we check and see if they're done is we just wanna carefully lift them up, and between the two middlest bones of the ribs, you just wanna pull them and see if that meat, see if that meat pulls away properly. And as you can tell by my gasping noises, these are cooked perfect. A lot of times we cook ribs so far that they have that fall off the bone texture, but they end up tasting like pulled pork. What we're actually looking for is the meat to be cooked enough to come away from the bone, but it still should have a little bit of bite and texture to it. And you'll notice that salt and pepper created an awesome crispy crust along the outside of our ribs that sealed in all the moisture from all that rib meat. Now all we're gonna do is flip our ribs over once to reveal the bottom side, where we see from taking that membrane off, everything has stayed nice and flat, nothing has curled up on us, and we have beautifully even cooked ribs. And we're gonna start slathering on our super thick barbecue sauce. Cover every single surface, get messy. Who cares if some spills on your shirt? It's not a big deal. And then we're gonna flip it over once. Lay it on thick. You want them to be saucy, you want them to spill down the front of your shirt, you want to have a bib on when you're eating these. And once you add your barbecue sauce to those ribs, all those fragrant spices that we put into that barbecue sauce are gonna start wafting into the air from the heat of those ribs, and you're gonna start to feel a little woozy because it's just way too much to handle. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna take those ribs and we're gonna go back to the oven. Our ribs have come out of the oven, and now I get to do the best part. I get to cut them up. So on our cutting board, ribs up, vertical, and all we're gonna do is cut down the middle to reveal that cooked rib meat in the center. And there's what we're looking for, everyone. We're looking for it to be just cooked, but not falling apart. So now you're just gonna follow the bones and cut straight through. And now why transfer to a new plate? Let's just put them up there nicely for everyone to take and grab as they walk by, because these will literally only last 3 minutes as soon as you bring them into the dining room. That sauce is nicely glazed and falling off them. And all we're gonna do is give it a swizzle of our sexy yellow oil, which is just canola oil, just pressed differently. And of course, because I'm a chef and I can't do anything without color, sprinkle some micro sprouts across the top, and there you have it. Easy oven-baked barbecue ribs. No barbecue, no long afternoon outside, just delicious tasting oven-baked ribs that you had to set and forget in the oven. Now get messy and enjoy. See you later.